Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. My name's Tony, and I never thought I'd be the man checking his wife's stories. For 10 years, Rachel and I built a life that looked steady from the outside. Quiet home, shared routines, vacations once a year. I wasn't jealous, not the type to snoop or question every detail. But the weekend she left for a girls' trip to Harbor Point, one small thing flipped the switch. She had rushed out the door Friday morning, laughing on the phone with one of her coworkers, a small crossbody purse slung over her shoulder. Nothing unusual except the faint, unfamiliar perfume trailing behind her. Not the kind I'd ever bought her, and not one I'd smelled in our house before. I told myself it didn't matter, kissed her cheek, and wished her a good weekend. That night, while tidying up, I noticed her overnight tote still sitting on the entry bench, half-zipped, like she'd unpacked it in a hurry or forgot to take it. That caught my attention. She hadn't mentioned going anywhere Thursday night, but something about the way the tote slouched open looked off. I picked it up to move it. As I lifted it, something slid from the side pocket. A paper sleeve, the kind hotels use to hold keycards. It was stamped with the Harbor Point Marina Hotel logo. Rachel had told me they were renting a cottage. Girl time, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. The sleeve didn't fit that story. I snapped a photo and tucked it back where I found it. The next evening, an old acquaintance, Miles Ortega, messaged me out of nowhere. He'd moved to Denver years ago. We hadn't talked since. His text read, "Hey, weird question. Was Rachel in Harbor Point this weekend? Pretty sure I saw her at the rooftop bar near Bay Street. She wasn't wearing a ring, so I didn't say hi. Just thought I'd ask." I stared at his message until the words blurred. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was a calculation. I took a screenshot, saved it in a locked folder. Then I walked to the bedroom, opened Rachel's vanity drawer, and there it was, her wedding ring. She had taken it off and left it behind before she even walked out the door Friday morning. Two separate signals, the hotel keycard and the ring she'd left at home. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. Instead, I told myself, slow down, stay quiet, collect facts. If she was lying, I wanted to see how deep it went. By Sunday morning, the weight of that hotel sleeve and Miles's text hadn't left my mind. I needed clarity, not arguments. So I started checking details. First, I called Clara Nguyen. She's the partner of one of Rachel's coworkers and had supposedly gone on the same trip. "Hey, Clara," I said lightly. "Rachel mentioned you all had a nice getaway. Which place did you stay at? I'm thinking of booking something similar for us later this year." Clara hesitated, then said, "Oh, the Harbor Point Marina Hotel. The one with the rooftop bar. Rachel didn't tell you?" That didn't match Rachel's version at all. She told me about a private off-grid cottage, no internet, just wine and chatter. A different story for me, another for Clara. I thanked her, acted casual, and hung up. Later, I checked our joint bank alerts. Saturday morning showed a rideshare charge that started at the Harbor Point Marina Hotel, the same name printed on that sleeve. A few lines down, a brunch receipt popped up. 2 entrees, 1 bill, just under $40. I snapped photos of everything. By the time Rachel came home that evening, I was calm, ready to listen. "Missed me?" she asked, smiling widely. "Of course," I said, taking her bag. My pulse stayed steady, even as I caught a faint whiff of that new perfume again. She dropped onto the couch, kicked off her sandals, and said, "Clara snores like a bear, by the way." I barely slept. I laughed on cue. "That bad?" "The worst. You'd never survive it." I nodded, biting back the truth. Rachel had told me they rented a remote private cabin. No distractions, no Wi-Fi. But now she was talking like they shared a room. A completely different setup. I played my part, pouring her a glass of wine and asking about their dinners, their conversations, their shopping. She filled in details easily, like a story rehearsed in her head. All the while, I kept track. What she said, what Clara said, what the receipts proved. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. Monday morning, Rachel hummed in the kitchen while making coffee. She kissed my cheek like everything was normal, grabbed her bag, and left for work. The second her car pulled away, I sat at the table and opened my laptop. I had already drafted an email at 2 a.m. to a family lawyer named Elena Park. Her firm was highly recommended for discretion. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. At her office, Elena didn't waste time. She asked direct questions. "Are you looking for proof, or are you ready for an exit?" Both, I told her. I don't want her to see it coming. She nodded. Then don't confront her. Don't tip your hand. Quietly build a record. Bank statements, photos, conversations. If she doesn't know, that's your advantage. I left with a folder of notes and the first real sense of control I'd felt in days. Back home, I set up a clean process. I synced Rachel's family iPad to our shared account, something she rarely touched. Notifications started to drip in, calendar updates, photo backups. Most were routine. Then one caught my eye, a draft itinerary saved to the iPad calendar. It listed initials, R and S, next to a Harbor Point dinner reservation. Who was S? I tested her story. That evening I said, I might schedule a client dinner on Friday. You're free, right? She smiled too quickly. Yeah, of course. No plans. But the itinerary said otherwise. She couldn't even keep her cover consistent with her own devices. I wrote it down in my notebook. Initials S plus Rachel, Harbor Point reservation, Friday. Another contradiction. Another thread in the unraveling. I didn't need to blow up her lies. Not yet. Every time she contradicted herself, she handed me another piece. And I was going to collect all of them before making a single move. Friday came fast. Rachel left the house at 8:15 a.m., blazer sharp, hair pinned like she was headed for something important. She kissed me on the forehead. Don't forget lunch, she said, like I was a kid she needed to remind. Then she walked out the door. Her calendar said she had a donor breakfast. The iPad, though, showed R and S, Museum Cafe, 9:30. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, drove into the city, and parked across from the museum entrance. At 9:42, she appeared. Rachel wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, early 30s, slim build. He wore a leather strap bracelet and carried himself like he belonged at her side. I took a photo with my phone, zoomed enough to see their hands brushing. Her ring finger was bare. They sat outside at the cafe. I stayed across the street, hidden behind a delivery truck. From there, I saw it all. The easy laughter, her leaning closer than necessary, her hand on his wrist when he cracked a joke. They looked practiced, like this wasn't the first time. 10 minutes later, she pulled her phone out, laughing as he leaned toward her screen. I clicked another photo. My stomach stayed calm, surprisingly calm. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It was a fact. When I got home, she was already back in sweats, stirring soup on the stove. The donor breakfast went long, she said casually. Big ideas for next season. I leaned against the counter, nodded. Sounds productive. Exhausting, she replied, rolling her shoulders. But worth it. I studied her face, how smoothly the lie came out. If I hadn't been there that morning, I might have believed her. I didn't push. I didn't accuse. I smiled back, already writing her words into my notebook under a single heading. Donor breakfast. Lie. By next week, I knew Rachel's pattern. She lied smoothly, carried herself like the story would always hold, and believed I was still blind. That gave me space to set the trap. Friday evening, I brought up an idea while we cleared dinner plates. What do you think about spending next weekend at your parents' lake house? Just us. Been a while. Rachel froze for half a second, then stretched, forcing a smile. I wish I could, Tony. We've got the springboard meeting at the gallery. I have to be there Sunday morning. I dried a plate slowly. Board meeting? Got it. She nodded, relieved I didn't press. But I wasn't done. That night, while she scrolled on her phone, I opened my laptop. Earlier that afternoon, from a clean alias account, I'd sent a request to book a private consult with her gallery for Sunday morning, just to see what came back. Within an hour, I received a polite reply. We're closed on Sundays. Please contact us during business hours. Now I had it in writing, not just a suspicion, but confirmation. The next step was practical. I leased a small apartment across town in my name, signed for 6 months, and moved important documents there. Passport, tax records, a few personal things I didn't want in the house when the time came. No theatrics, just preparation. Before leaving for a solo weekend at a rented lake cabin, I made one last adjustment. In the living room, hidden in a hollowed-out book on the shelf, I placed a small motion-triggered camera. Legal, discreet, angled straight at the couch. I didn't expect a show. I wanted confirmation. Saturday morning, I told Rachel, I'll head out early, take some time at the lake, clear my head. You should enjoy a quiet weekend. She kissed me on the cheek. You deserve it. I drove off, my chest steady, my plan already in motion. By evening, from the cabin, I opened my laptop, logged into the feed, and waited to see whether the silence in our home would hold. The footage loaded grainy at first, then cleared. Our living room, quiet, familiar. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then, around 7, the side door opened. Sammy stepped inside like he belonged there. He didn't knock, didn't pause. Rachel greeted him with 2 glasses already in her hand. They sat close on the couch, laughing, their knees brushing like it was natural. I didn't need audio to understand the rhythm between them. Her body leaned toward him, not away. She touched his arm once, then again. He whispered something, and she threw her head back, laughing, an expression I hadn't seen from her in months. My hand tightened on the edge of the desk, but I stayed still. This was why I'd set the camera. Proof that didn't rely on my word against hers. They didn't stay long. After less than an hour, he kissed her cheek, and she walked him out. No drama, no rush. Like it was routine. Rachel returned to the kitchen, still smiling. I sat back in the chair, closed my laptop, and exhaled. That was the moment everything shifted. No more questions, no more maybes. She'd handed me certainty in her own voice. By midnight, I had arranged the files neatly. Screenshots, receipts, photos, and now video. I copied them to a secure drive and labeled the folder with one word: exit. Rachel thought she was ahead, that her lies covered the trail. But she didn't see the ground falling away beneath her. I lay down in the cabin bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept without staring at the ceiling. I had everything I needed. Now it was just about timing. I waited a week before setting the stage. Rachel kept acting like nothing had changed. Ring back on her finger, cheerful chatter at dinner, casual kisses on the way out the door. She thought she was safe. That illusion worked in my favor. On Thursday, I told her, let's host a small dinner tomorrow. Just us and a couple of people we haven't seen in a while. It'll be good to reconnect. She hesitated, then smiled. Sure. Who's coming? Clara, her partner, and Darren, I said evenly. Her brother Darren Pierce had always been protective. If anyone would see through her spin, it was him. She couldn't refuse without raising questions, so she nodded. All right, I'll pick up wine and flowers. Friday night, she dressed casually but flawlessly, and even put on the playlist from our wedding dinner. I set the table, lit candles, and poured wine. My phone vibrated once in my pocket at 6:15, the signal. Right then, every person I'd selected received an email from an anonymous account. Inside was a tidy package, screenshots of receipts, photos from Harbor Point, her calendar entries with Sammy's initials, and a 30-second clip from the living room. No commentary, just facts. Rachel was arranging napkins when her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. The sound filled the room like a drumbeat. She glanced at the screen, her face draining of color. She unlocked it, read in silence, and froze. I set down my wine glass and asked, calm as ever, where did the Harbor Point keycard come from, Rachel? She stared at me, wide-eyed. Tony, what did you do? Just asked a question. Her mouth opened, closed, then finally, it's complicated. Complicated, I repeated. You'll be fine without me. You've had practice. Rachel's eyes filled, but no words came. She didn't chase me, didn't beg. She just stood in the doorway, phone trembling in her hand as I walked out. That was the last night I slept in that house. 6 months have passed since the night I walked out. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. Small, plain. Every item inside belongs to me and no one else. The silence feels different here. Not heavy, not suspicious. Just quiet. The divorce moved faster than I expected. With the evidence I had gathered, there were no long battles, no drawn-out negotiations. Rachel signed the papers quietly, almost mechanically, as if the fight had already drained out of her. We divided what needed dividing. It wasn't dramatic, it was final. And in that finality, I felt something I hadn't in years. Absolute freedom. I've started seeing someone, Isabella Flores. I told her everything from the beginning. No secrets, no half-truths. She listened without judgment. You did what you had to do, she said once, her hand steady on mine. With her, I moved slowly, cautious, but honest. It feels like a clean start. As for Rachel, I heard she left the gallery and took a position at another art center across town. We haven't spoken since that dinner. I haven't needed to. I later heard through Darren that things with Sammy, the mysterious S, didn't last. Whatever thrill Rachel thought she had found burned out quickly once the secrecy was gone. He wasn't looking for permanence, only distraction, and the moment her life grew complicated, he stepped away. Their so-called connection collapsed under the weight of reality, leaving her not with a partner, but with silence. In the end, she lost more than a marriage. She lost the illusion that Sammy was ever going to replace me. One night, while clearing out old folders on my laptop, I found the photo of the hotel keycard sleeve I'd taken months ago. The first clue. The small slip that set everything in motion. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Because the truth is, that card wasn't just proof of her betrayal. It was the moment she freed me. She removed her ring, she let herself be someone else, and in doing that, she gave me permission to stop pretending we were still us. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her back either. All I wanted was peace, and I finally have it. Walking out wasn't revenge. It was release. And the moment I closed that door, I knew I'd never look back. Thank you for watching. Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. Betty and I had been married for 5 years, and lately the air in our house felt heavier than it used to. Conversations that once flowed easily had thinned into practical exchanges about bills, groceries, or schedules. She spent more time on her phone, scrolling with a look I couldn't read, while I buried myself in work and late-night projects. That Thursday night, we ate in silence, forks clinking against plates, then just sat there. She scrolled while I stacked the dishes at my side of the table. The glow of her phone lit up her face, but she avoided my eyes. I waited, thinking maybe she'd say something about her day. Instead, she let out a long breath, set the phone down, and looked past me like she was bracing for impact. "I think we should take a break," she said, her voice flat, rehearsed, almost detached. I leaned back in my chair. For a moment, I just studied her. The words weren't surprising. They were only the first time she'd said them out loud. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just said, "Okay." Her head snapped up, startled. "That's it? Just okay?" "You said you need space," I replied, my voice even. "I'll give you." She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. But after months of silence and tension, I wasn't about to fight for what she was already giving away. What I didn't say, but already knew, was that a break never really meant time to think. It meant someone else was already in the picture. A week earlier, she had mentioned her ex, Adrian Cole, was back in town. "Adrian just got a job here," she had said casually, though her tone was off. Now, with her sudden call for a break, I didn't need anyone to draw me a map. 2 days later, she packed some clothes and left, but half her boxes stayed stacked against the living room wall. She said she'd be back for them soon. She also assumed I would cover the townhouse rent by myself. "Connor, it's just temporary," she told me. "You can handle it for a month. I'll sort things out." "No," I said evenly. "We signed the lease together. We're both responsible until it ends." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't have to be so cold about it." "I'm not. I'm practical." She left in a huff, and that was the last face-to-face exchange we had for a while. I emailed her the rent share agreement that night, keeping everything in writing. If she wanted space, she would have it, with the full weight of her obligations attached. I didn't know it then, but her break was about to turn into something far more complicated than either of us expected. The first rent payment came due, and Betty didn't transfer her share. I covered the full amount to protect my credit, then sent her a certified letter with a copy of our lease highlighted in yellow. Clause 14, joint and several liability. Her reply came by text. "Can't this wait? I'm under a lot of stress." "No," I wrote back. "The rent is due on the 1st. You're responsible for half." Radio silence. 2 days later, I checked Instagram. There she was, smiling with Adrian at a wine bar, captioned "Old Friends, New Beginnings." I screenshotted it, not out of jealousy, but for documentation. By the second month, she still hadn't paid. I sent another certified notice and a demand letter I drafted. This time, I mailed it to her parents' house, her last known permanent address. She called me within hours, furious. "What the hell, Connor? A legal letter? From you?" I'm following the lease terms we both signed, I said calmly. If you want to end your obligation, we can pay the break fee and terminate early. Otherwise, you're on the hook. You know I can't afford that right now. Then you need to honor your share. The call ended with her shouting that I was heartless. But the next morning, she showed up at the landlord's office to sign the termination paperwork. Her half of the fee went on a credit card. She stormed past me afterward, muttering, "You'll regret this." Her belongings became the next issue. State law required notice before they could be considered abandoned. I coordinated with Mrs. Klein, our landlord, who mailed the formal notice to Betty's parents. 15 days passed with no response. I rented a storage unit, boxed everything, and kept an itemized list. When she finally texted weeks later, "Where are my things?" I replied with the address and invoice number. "This is petty," she shot back. "No," I answered. "This is organized." That was the last I heard from her for a while. I filed the divorce paperwork myself the following week, making the split official instead of waiting on her half measures. With that done, I settled into a new routine, thinking the storm had finally passed. By the third month, the house was quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I worked, hit the gym before sunrise, and spent evenings reading or cooking simple meals. The routine steadied me. That's where I met Elaine Park, an ER nurse who trained early mornings before her hospital shifts. Our first interaction happened over a broken resistance band. Simple, unremarkable, but it sparked something. From there, a quiet rhythm formed between us. Morning conversations turned into shared coffees, which eventually led to dinners. There was no drama, just calm. That calm cracked in June when my phone lit up with a text from Betty. "Hey, been thinking about us. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a minute before replying. "I'm seeing someone now. I wish you the best." An hour later, there was pounding on my front door. When I opened it, chain still on, Betty stood there, mascara streaked down her face. "You can't just move on like that." "It's been months, Betty," I said evenly. "We've been married 5 years, but you ended it. Remember?" "I said a break, not a breakup," she snapped. "A pause until I figured things out." "A pause where you moved in with Adrian?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed, and she looked away. "That was different." "No, that was a choice." She started crying then, her shoulders shaking. "He lied to me, Connor. It was a mistake. I want us back. You need to leave before I call the police." Her face twisted into anger. "You're cruel. Heartless. After everything?" "Betty," I said, pulling out my phone, "this is your only warning. Go." She screamed something I couldn't make out, kicked the door, and stormed off into the night. I dialed the non-emergency line and filed a report for harassment. The officer gave me a case number. Just paperwork, for now. But I had the feeling this wasn't the last time she'd show up. Betty didn't stay gone. She shifted tactics. It started with calls to my office. My boss, Patricia Delgado, pulled me into her office one morning holding a printed email. "Connor, did you know your ex-wife is accusing you of manipulating vendor contracts?" I read the page. It was nonsense, but it had my full name and position. "I've documented everything," I said, handing her a folder I had already prepared. Texts, the lease letters, the police report number. Patricia flipped through, eyebrows rising. "Good," she said finally. "Keep recording everything. And if this continues, get a lawyer." The next week, she appeared at my gym, lingering by the entrance, pretending to be on her phone. A day later, I saw her at the cafe where I grabbed coffee before work. She never spoke, just watched. Then Elaine got dragged in. An anonymous email arrived at her hospital's HR office, claiming she was dating a dangerous man and putting patients at risk. Elaine called me at lunch, voice shaking. "This is her," she said. "Has to be." "It is," I told her. And we're done playing defense. That evening, I walked into the precinct and asked for Detective Farah, who handled harassment cases. I laid out a binder with every message, every photo, every incident logged with dates and times. She flipped through slowly, then looked up. "This is a clear pattern. I'll recommend a temporary protective order. The court can decide on longer-term restrictions." The order was granted a week later, temporary, pending a hearing. Papers had to be served before they became enforceable. But before that could happen, Betty made her boldest move yet. It was a Friday night when Elaine called me, her voice low and urgent. Connor, she's outside, parked across the street, just sitting there. I told her to lock the door, then drove over. By the time I arrived, 2 police cars were already there. Betty was standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, telling the officers she'd just stopped to check her GPS. One of the officers recognized me from the report I'd filed earlier. He nodded toward Betty. "Is this the individual named in your protective order filing?" "Yes," I said, "and she has no reason to be here." That was enough. Even though the papers hadn't been formally served, the pattern spoke for itself. They cuffed her and placed her in the back of the cruiser. She twisted around and yelled at me through the open door. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To ruin me?" I didn't answer. At the hearing 2 weeks later, Betty arrived with a lawyer who tried to paint me as vindictive and bitter. My attorney, Matthew Lynn, stayed calm and presented everything in order: the texts, the social media posts, the harassment reports. The judge leaned back, clearly unimpressed by her defense, said, "This is not the behavior of a heartbroken spouse. This is stalking. A 2-year protective order is granted." Betty's face crumpled. There was no victory in it for me, only relief. The law had drawn a clear line. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. 3 quiet months passed. No late-night knocks, no strange emails, no sightings. Elaine and I began to breathe again. Then my lawyer, Matthew Lynn, called one morning. "Connor, Betty's attorney, Jasmine, reached out. They're asking for a mediated meeting. She'll agree to a 5-year extension of the protective order if you grant her 15 minutes face-to-face. She says she has information you deserve to know." My first instinct was no, Elaine's too. "It's a trap," she said, shaking her head. "You owe her nothing." But Matthew raised an eyebrow. 5 years of guaranteed distance is leverage, and we'll be in the room the whole time. Reluctantly, I agreed. The conference room was sterile. Betty walked in with Jasmine. She looked different, calmer, healthier, but her eyes carried weight. "Thank you for giving me this chance," she began. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just need to explain." I folded my arms. "You've got 15 minutes. She drew a shaky breath. Adrian didn't just reappear. He pressured me. He had emails from years ago, things that could be twisted into corporate theft. He said he'd destroy my career and send them to my family if I didn't come back to him. My jaw tightened. Blackmail. "Yes," she nodded. "He made me post photos. He made me leave you. I thought if I played along, he'd stop. But when he dropped me, I broke. That's when I turned on you and on Elaine. I lost control. That's on me." Her lawyer slid a document across the table, an official police report dated 2 months earlier. Adrian Cole was listed as the subject of an extortion investigation. My name appeared in the collateral victims section. Betty wiped her eyes but kept her voice steady. "You didn't deserve the lies, or the fallout. I'm cooperating with investigators now. I wanted you to know the truth before it all comes out in court." Jasmine spoke then. "As promised, my client will sign a 5-year extension on the order. She's also prepared written apologies for you and Miss Park." I didn't speak right away. The explanation didn't undo the chaos, but it reframed it. Betty wasn't just reckless, she'd been cornered. 2 months later, news broke that Adrian Cole had been arrested in another state. Wire fraud, extortion, coercion. His charges filled 2 pages. Turns out, Betty wasn't the only target. At least 4 other women had filed similar complaints. Detective Farah called me personally. "Your documentation helped establish his pattern. You and your wife, your ex, weren't isolated cases. He was running the same play everywhere." Betty testified against him. I wasn't there, but Matthew confirmed she held her ground in court, describing how Adrian had manipulated her into leaving me and used threats to keep her under his thumb. It was part of the prosecution's larger case. Meanwhile, Elaine and I built something steady. We signed a lease on a new apartment closer to her hospital. Clean walls, no boxes in corners, no ghosts of old fights. For the first time in a long while, I felt like life wasn't a reaction. It was design. Betty's written apology arrived through our lawyers. Elaine read hers at the kitchen table. It was raw, an admission of harassment, an acknowledgement of fear she caused. At work, Patricia Delgado closed the book on the false accusations. "Your record is clear," she told me in her office. "Clients reviewed your documentation. They're satisfied. So am I." It was a small sentence, but it felt like oxygen. The weeks after Adrian's arrest were quiet. No strange cars, no sudden texts, no smear posts online. Just silence, the kind I could live in. But silence has its own edge, because sooner or later something or someone tries to fill it. And in my case, it was Betty's family. It was a Sunday afternoon when I ran into Betty's mother, Marjorie, in the grocery store. She spotted me in the produce aisle, paused, then walked over slowly, like she was debating whether to say anything. "Connor," she said, her voice careful. I nodded. "I won't keep you," she went on. "I just wanted to say, what happened with Betty? It forced her to get help. The therapy, the order, even the arrest. It made her face things she'd been running from. She's improving, little by little." I studied her for a moment, then answered, "I'm glad to hear she's finding her footing. But distance is still necessary." She gave a sad smile. "I know, and I respect that. Thank you for not letting it destroy you, for handling it the way you did." Then she turned and walked away. I stood there with a bag of apples in my hand, thinking back to that night months earlier when Betty first said it. "I think we should take a break." Back then, I'd answered with one word, "Okay." And that answer had carried me through every storm that followed. The truth is, a break was never about space. It was about choices. She chose Adrian. She chose silence when I asked for clarity. She chose escalation when I moved on. And I chose something else: boundaries, records, and the law. Elaine and I built a quiet life in the aftermath. Our apartment was ordinary in the best way. Clean counters, steady routines, no drama seeping in through the walls. For the first time, I felt like my energy wasn't being drained by someone else's crisis. What I learned was simple. Red flags aren't quirks, they're warnings. If someone won't give you reasons, their silence is the reason. Protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. And most of all, you can acknowledge someone's pain without making it your responsibility to carry it. Betty had her path. I had mine. The difference now was that no one else got to declare a pause on my life. That chapter was closed, and I intended to keep it that way. Thank you for watching.